Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise on the matter of public importance submitted by the member for Pascoe Vale. Don't get too excited though, the member for Mordialloc. I think I might take a little bit of a different direction to the talking points we've heard today from the Premier's office. Not too many different speeches from those opposite. The talking points were clearly distributed wide. Deputy Speaker, we've heard a lot from those opposite today about the fact that Victoria claims to be the education state. But the claim that those opposite make is laughable. On most meaningful measures, under the Education Minister's watch, Victoria is in freefall when it comes to education. Now, despite overseeing, and sometimes it seems being blindsided, by crisis after crisis in his own portfolio, rumours continue to abound in this place that the Deputy Premier is counting numbers in the Labor caucus to replace the Premier. Now, whether or not the Minister is successful in that pursuit, Victorian families would be forgiven for wondering why the Minister in charge of education in this state hasn't made improving our education system his priority. Where to begin on the education state under Minister Carroll and the Allan Labor government? The VCE debacle, the teacher shortage crisis, indeed high-risk youth offenders in Victorian classrooms, overcrowded, crumbling schools. Let's just look at a snapshot before diving into some of that detail, Deputy Speaker. Our teachers are the lowest paid in Australia. Our state government funding per student is the second lowest in the Commonwealth. The cost to send a child to a government school in Victoria has increased year on year, with Victorian families paying the highest fees, charges and parent contributions in the nation at a primary school level. Almost 30% of Victorian students are failing to meet basic standards in English and maths. Victoria was the last state to adopt phonics in the teaching of reading, despite the weight of scientific evidence behind structured literacy being clearly best practice. And Victoria is the only state or territory where student attendance was lower in 2024 than 2 years ago, and that over half of high school students, years 7 to 10, attend school less than 90% of the time. These are just some of the metrics where Victoria is far from best in class under the Education Minister's watch. But let's dig a little deeper on some of those issues. Let's start with learning outcomes. And as I said, Deputy Speaker, almost 30% of Victorian students are failing to meet basic standards in English and mathematics under this government. The 2024 NAPLAN data has confirmed for Victorian students that spelling, grammar, punctuation and numeracy outcomes fell for Year 9 students compared to the previous year. Overall, outcomes are ranked first or second in 11 out of 20 categories, down from 16 the previous year. Nearly 2/3 of Year 3 Indigenous students are failing to meet standards in grammar and punctuation. And almost 7 in 10 Year 9 students whose parents who did not finish Year 12 are underperforming in punctuation and grammar. So those opposite like to cry about the wonderful NAPLAN results in this state, yet under the Allan Labor government, those metrics and the fact that nearly 1/3 of students in this state are not meeting basic standards when it comes to literacy and numeracy is an absolute disgrace. And it's not just the NAPLAN data we need to look at. Let's look at the PISA data, which has highlighted that education outcomes in Victoria for 15-year-old students are the worst reading literacy result on record, with 1 in 5 students classified as low performers. The worst mathematical literacy results on record, with more than 1 in 4 students classified as low performers. And a stagnant result for scientific literacy, which was virtually equal to 2018, which was the poorest result on record. The PISA report states, and I quote, that for low performer students have not acquired the skills and knowledge to allow them to adequately participate in 21st century workforce and contribute as productive citizens. Concerningly, half of all Victorian students are now not achieving a proficient standard in mathematics, a foundational skill, Deputy Speaker, that is going to be absolutely essential to employability in a modern, technologically advanced economy. So it's not just the NAPLAN data, it's the international data that shows that under the Allen Labor government, learning outcomes are at record lows in this state, and it's Victorian students that continue to pay the price. Now, those opposite will say we've put programs in place. We've put programs in place to address these outcomes which are in free fall. The Tutor Learning Initiative is just one of those programs, a $1.2 billion initiative by the Allen Labor government. Yet, let's look at what the Victorian Auditor-General had to say about the Tutor Learning Initiative just last year. The initiative did not significantly improve students' learning compared to similar non-tutored students. In fact, the Auditor-General said, and I quote, wait for it, "We found that students who received tutoring learnt less than those who did not receive tutoring." That is the standard of tutoring and programs aimed at addressing our learning outcomes in free fall in this state. Deputy Speaker, if I turn to the state of our schools, we know that they are overcrowded and in desperate need of capital upgrades. We know, my colleagues know, speaking to their local communities, that there's toxic mould. There are walls that are falling down, and students are being forced to learn in unconditioned classrooms every single day. Yet what we see from this government is another inability to deliver on their commitments. In last year's budget, 29 promised school upgrades were not fully funded in the budget. They've been given a share of $24 million of planning, with no detail as to when those promised upgrades will be delivered. Now, of course, those promised upgrades for those schools were promised on the eve of the 2022 election. Deputy Speaker, an election commitment that we have seen time and time again not delivered by this government. Now, if I look at some of the commitments that were made that have not been delivered, let's look at Manavale Primary School in the electorate of Werribee that has not had their capital upgrade delivered. Mordialloc College in the electorate of Mordialloc. And of course, San Remo Primary School in the electorate of Bass. And we know this because the member for Bass has indeed sponsored a petition to her own government, to her own minister, to get that upgrade delivered. That is the state of the books, and the fact that the rising debt in this state means that these schools are not going to be, these school upgrades are not going to be delivered under this government. Deputy Speaker, today there are over 1,000 vacancies for teachers in this state. The teacher shortage crisis is one that continues to worsen by the day. We know by looking at the department's teacher supply and demand report that there has been a 48% increase in the rate of both primary and secondary school teachers leaving the profession. Now, once again, the government will say, we've put in place programs, policy, initiatives to tackle this problem. Indeed, $1.6 billion the minister likes to talk about. $1.6 billion to deliver what? 1,000 vacancies today for teachers in our classrooms. And what does that mean? That means that students don't have permanent teachers in the classroom, Deputy Speaker. It means they're forced to learn in doubled-up classrooms. And VCE students at schools across this state are being sent home at lunchtime because they do not have a teacher to take their VCE class. Deputy Speaker, while we're on the topic of VCE, let's just turn our mind to the VCE exam debacle. And where do we even begin? The third consecutive year that this government has absolutely done their VCE students a disservice by stuffing up the VCE exams. Over 65 exams were compromised this year, putting students' hard work at risk, jeopardising their results to get into the course at university or the pathway they want next. It is unacceptable. And the minister knew about it from the beginning and was complicit in the cover-up, This just scratches the surface, but even if we turn to the bureaucracy, take the Victorian Institute of Teaching, overseeing the teacher registration program and the backlog there. The VCAA, as I said, overseeing when it comes to the VCE crisis year on year. And of course, Victorian School Building Authority, which is bogging principals down in red tape and making it harder and harder to deliver. Under this government, under the minister, This state is anything but the education state, whether it's on learning outcomes, whether it is on our teacher shortage crisis, whether it is on our crumbling schools.
Order.
This government cannot manage money, and the students are paying the price.
Hear, hear.